Hey, this is part 2 of the compositing layer mask uh, smart filter. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my shark into the water, and I'm going to use the magnetic lasso tool to start with my selection. So I'm going to roughly just draw around the edge. I know it's not going to be perfect because there's similar tonal values between the water and the shark, so I'm just going to make a rough selection around the shark. And I could use any tool really to make this selection. This is just one that I picked from before. And then we're getting close to the other edge. So what I could do at this point is I could go back in with Quick Mask, and I can click on Quick Mask, and that'll show me a representation of my selection. If I want to add to that selection, all I have to do is use my brush tool, and I can paint in that selection. Now let's say that I want to leave this edge right here just to show you that I can make changes once I combine the two images. But this will be a really good edge to show you a technique with. If I have a straight line and I click once and hold down Shift, it's going to draw a straight line right there. So once again, I'm going to do it up here. I click once, then I hold down Shift and click again, and it's going to draw that straight line. That's going to be really useful and a good time saver. In this area, I switched colors to erase the red, so that's not going to be selected down there. It's going to leave that part of the shark. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop right there, make it a selection, and move it over to my other layer. All I did was grab my move tool and drag it over. And I still left some work to do over in this image. You can see on the edge of the shark it's not quite perfect, so that's something that we can work on once we have drug it over. I need to make it smaller because he's incredibly huge right now, so I'll go Command T and hold down Shift and make it smaller. And I want to drag from the corners, not from the top, because I want to keep the proportions. So that's Command T, and then I held down Shift and drug in from the corners. So what I can do now is I can go ahead and I could grab a layer mask to continue to edit the shark. I can zoom in, and I can grab my brush tool, make sure that black is in the foreground because I'm working with a white mask. Click once there, and then hold down Shift and click right there. So I'm just going to go around the edge and edit the shark as I need to. So you continue this process around the shark. One of the things that we decided we wanted to do in class was to use a blending mode, such as we could use overlay. And overlay will make the shark look like he's underwater because it's going to match the texture and the color around him on the other layers. So that's one way you can do that there. We could also use a gradient with the blending mode, and that would gradually fade that, and I can do that now. If I want to, actually I'm going to go ahead and leave that. One last thing we need to do is we need to we need to add a smart filter, and we also need to color in the beach using our brush tool. So I'm going to create a new layer above this, and so this is a blank layer that nothing's been added to, and I'm going to attempt to paint a color onto the beach. I can go ahead and hide my hula girl and hide my cat, so you can just see the beach. And I also hid the shark. And I'm going to select whatever color I want to paint on the beach, and I'm going to pick something unrealistic like a red. Make my brush a little bit bigger. Right now my opacity is set to 100 and my flow is set to 100. I've got a blending mode of normal just to show you what I've got here. And I can go ahead and paint on this if I want to. And obviously it's really solid and chunky and kind of nasty. But if I wanted to change this at this point, I could I changed that to, I could have chosen overlay to paint on with it, and that would have looked different. But at this point, with it being solid as it is, I can go down to overlay, and that'll give it just a really light outline. And then I could go back and I could erase the edges around the painting that I've done. I think overlay is a good option. And then let me just show you, if I go in with the eraser tool, I'm directly erasing on that layer because this is not an adjustment layer. This is just, it's just a really harsh contrast between the two. So the only way to get rid of something that I've done is to use the eraser when you have a blank layer. I guess I could go back in my history as well, but this is the process. I can lower the opacity and make it more subtle if I want to. The other blending modes are just going to represent it in a different way. You can see soft light works pretty well, vivid light not so much. So something else you can do, if I wanted to do this again, I'm going to delete this layer and just start over to show you a different method you could use. I can start out by lowering the opacity and the flow, so that way I'm going to be in more control of it throughout this. So I've got my brush tool, I've got overlay set, make sure this is lowered. And I'm going to attempt to paint on that. So this is going to be a very gradual change, and I'm just going to slowly notice a difference. So this may be something that you're more interested in doing rather than just a really harsh 100% change. And so I can add my shark and my hula girl back in, and the last thing that I could do is create a smart filter. So to create the smart filter, what I'm going to do is decide what I want to affect it on, and I'm going to say that I want to work with the shark. I'm going to go I'm going to go filter, convert for smart filters, and now I get the little square icon there. I'm going to go up to filter, and I'm going to go down to artistic, and we can actually choose, instead of choosing just one, we can look at it in the filter gallery. And let's pick okay, here's glass. So glass does kind of look like he's underwater, so I'm going to choose that. And I'm going to make it very gradual. So I've highlighted my smart filter, I've got black in the foreground, I'm going to grab my gradient, make sure I've got the gradient from left to right, or I could do the radial gradient. I'm going to pick the first option here. I'm going to start at the top and drag to the bottom. And you can see a slight change, and this is what my gradient is looking like right here. So it's fading that filter, and so it kind of looks like the water is more rippled as he goes down and descends. So those are the three things we've shown. We've shown the coloring with the brush tool, compositing, and using a smart filter.